Hello and welcome back to the channel. On this channel I've spoken about the Northern Ireland Protocol quite a lot, and right now Northern Ireland Protocol is back in British news. Now of course people would have heard quite a lot about this, and so some people may have stumbled onto this video and thinking, yeah, what is going on with that Northern Ireland Protocol? And if your instincts are telling you that there's something fishy going on, then I would say your instincts are right. And I'm not just referring to the dead and rotting fish that British fishermen can no longer sell, although that does have a role, or their involvement in this scenario. Now, what is fishy is the way Northern Ireland Protocol has been presented, the way it's being argued, and the way it's being weaponised into a political issue that is actually quite divorced from reality. So anyone can be very much forgiven for feeling quite confused and trying to understand what actually is the problem here. Why is the Northern Ireland Protocol creating such a fuss? Well, for anyone new to this channel, I am the collaborative negotiator. I'm a professional negotiator, and my role here is to try and untangle these things and try and explain right to the heart of the matter. So let's start by asking the question, what is actually wrong with the Northern Ireland Protocol? And I've previously done a video where I did even look at what the Northern Ireland Protocol actually had to say. And you can look for that in my channel if you wish. But what I really want to point out here is that the Northern Ireland Protocol, like anything in an international treaty circuit, is a compromise. And it was a very difficult compromise, trying to balance a whole host of very competing issues. So the British government's desire to leave the European single market and customs union versus the British government, the European Union, the American government as well, commitment to preserving the Good Friday Agreement. So the protocol is designed to balance all those things. Now, of course, no one's going to claim this is perfect. It is very difficult to do that. Very easy to say, well, there are holes in it and there are problems and so on. So there always was going to be that element of you're going to have to tweak it as you go along, as you encounter issues. However, if we look at the Northern Ireland in the context of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and the Withdrawal Agreement that was signed by the UK and the EU, then it very much is serving its purpose. And it is serving its purpose of shielding Northern Ireland from the consequences of Brexit and maintaining the commitments made by all the parties to the Good Friday Agreement. And usually with these things, it takes several years to see the evidence that proves the argument one way or another. But actually we don't have to wait that long. We've got already a good year's worth of economic data. And what the economic data is showing, that the Northern Ireland Protocol, albeit perhaps imperfectly, is actually working. And the reason why the economic data is showing that is because the British economy is spiralling downwards quite significantly. The COVID pandemic, the trade barriers preventing British goods from being exported to the EU, all of that is having a massively detrimental impact to the British economy, with one exception, and that exception is Northern Ireland. And that is because Northern Ireland is in a truly unique position of being able to trade with the UK, with Great Britain rather, and with the EU without facing tariff barriers. Now, I specifically said tariff barriers there because there are some slight non-tariff barriers there. And this is one of the compromises, is that they basically put the border down the Irish Sea. And what that means is that to safeguard the EU single market, the British government has to ensure that the goods going from mainland Britain into Northern Ireland will remain in Northern Ireland, or if they do go to the Republic of Ireland, for example, that those goods are subject to the import checks that is required by the EU single market. Now there's a there were some issues with this. So, but to cut a long story short, really, all those problems are because the UK government has refused to uphold its end of the bargain. Part of this is because Boris Johnson refused to agree longer than a 12-month transition period, and 12 months was nowhere near long enough for the British government to build the IT, to build the customs post, to build the infrastructure and the people in order to carry out those checks, in order to generate the trade data that the EU required. So basically, the UK was not doing what it should have done in terms of those goods going into Northern Ireland. There are no restrictions on goods coming out of Northern Ireland, whether going into Europe or into Great Britain. That still remains the case. It's just the case of British goods going into Northern Ireland should have been checked and weren't to be. So what that has meant, of course, is the EU has not entirely been very happy. However, the EU has compromised quite significantly, and I covered this in a previous video. And what the EU did is they agreed for the checks to be minimised very substantially, and for the UK government to provide the EU Commission with live trade data so that the EU Commission can simply monitor what is going into Northern Ireland, and by extension what then goes on into the Republic of Ireland or into the EU single market, because that is all they care about in this context. And so they've made some various proposals, and the UK government has effectively rejected those proposals. Now, quite normally you don't see any of this sort of thing. These sorts of negotiations would only ever be conducted behind closed doors by officials, and they would iron out these sorts of issues, quietly, discreetly, and get on with it. However, going back to the question, what is wrong with the Northern Ireland Protocol? Well, nothing economically is wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it in the practical sense, albeit there could be certain improvements which the EU has proposed. All the problems with the protocol are political and ideological. On the British government side, the protocol is something that they can weaponise to try and generate anti-EU feeling. In Northern Ireland, the Democratic Unionist Party is ideologically opposed to the protocol because of the fact that it creates a small trade border between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, and they're ideologically opposed to any kind of border whatsoever, regardless of the economic benefits that this generates from Northern Ireland. That fundamentally is what is the problem with the protocol. It is a compromise that is perhaps going against people who don't particularly like to compromise. And that is going to pose a whole host of interesting problems. So this then brings to the next question. What's the strategy? What is the actual strategy to resolving this problem? And unfortunately, not really what anyone would think would be a strategy. For the Unionists, it's a strategy of creating political turmoil in order to undo the agreement, if you like, undo the trade and cooperation agreement that Britain signed with the EU. And essentially, it's a way by which the Unionist faction in Northern Ireland are trying to safeguard Northern Ireland from closer integration with the Republic of Ireland. That is what their strategy is. So everything they're doing is designed to prevent Irish unification. On the British government side, their strategy is not really to deal with the problem. They could already have dealt with the problem if they were so minded. But what it provides is a useful tool by which they can distract the press in particular from the other issues that they have. Cost of living crisis and the energy crisis being a classic example, and all the other multitudes of failures currently engulfing the British government right now. But the strategy for Boris Johnson and his government is always what Boris Johnson does. It's a procrastination. That is literally his main strategy for dealing with so many things. It is procrastination. So I'll post a link to the BBC article where Liz Truss has announced that the UK government will be putting forward legislation to make changes to the Northern Ireland, to allow them to implement the Northern Ireland Protocol in a way that no one's really clear. And what you have to remember is that this isn't actually designed to do anything. It is just a delaying tactic. It allows Liz Truss and Boris Johnson to pretend to the Unionists that they are doing something. They can, at the same token, pretend to the EU that they're doing something but they're not going to change anything. And really, it can take quite a long while for that legislation to be placed. And that is time that the government desperately needs right now while it tries to ride out a whole host of other scandals and problems. So we should then ask ourselves, what are the potential repercussions of putting forward that legislation and actually using it? Because the British government might get away by having that legislation but never actually implementing it. Because if they actually use it, then what it means is that the UK government is unilaterally rewriting the Northern Ireland Protocol, or derogating, as the lawyers like to say, from certain provisions. And what that means is that the UK would be in breach of the withdrawal agreement and obviously in breach of international treaty. But of course, there is an argument for what the UK government is doing. And the argument for is that they're trying to placate some probably implacable sides in Northern Ireland to get them to reform the Assembly and to begin governing. So in that context, they do need to do something. Because if they fail to get the Assembly back up and running, then that puts Northern Ireland into a potential spiral of downwards descent. And what I mean by that is that they hit a political impasse. And when things like that happen, then democracy starts to fail. When democracy starts to fail, then people turn to non-democratic means to vent their displeasure. In Northern Ireland, history shows that can be extremely bloody and violent. So that is the worst case scenario in terms of repercussions, that violence breaks out in Northern Ireland. And this is the problem that the British government has, is they can implement one solution that placates the Unionists, but probably would anger the Republicans. They could do something else, which is accept the EU's proposals, maybe make a few counter proposals to address a few bits and pieces, which would placate the Republicans, but probably anger the Unionists, who are not really at all interested in any proposals, workable or otherwise, it would seem. But if they get this wrong, then they're going to enter into a path where the EU will be forced to take action. And the EU has already indicated there are potential options. They can take the UK government to court, but that's a very slow process. They could hit the UK government and the UK economy exceedingly hard by putting up trade barriers, by even withdrawing or suspending or cancelling the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which would cause some harm to the EU market, but would cause massive harm to the British economy. And finally, but not least, we should also include the US, who had made it very clear that unilateral action by the British government that goes against the spirit of the protocol would not be welcomed. They have not been very explicit about what the sort of repercussions the US would bring out, but at this point in time you can imagine them being somewhat political and economic. So right now the British government is in this strange position where no matter which direction it turns, there's some really terrible potential repercussions. And that is always the case when you never really want to face up to your responsibilities and the consequences of your actions, you try and delay and procrastinate. And my earlier point that the only strategy here is delay. So what next for the Northern Ireland Protocol? What are they actually going to do? This is very difficult to call. No doubt they will try and push forward with the legislative agenda. An uncharitable person might even say that this Parliament will probably end before that law can even come into place. Right now, I'm not even sure whether Boris Johnson would even still be Prime Minister by the end of this year. And if that's the case, then that legislation can be quietly dropped. So for him, this is just a strategy to delay problems, which he'll deal with another day, if he ever does deal with it, or he'll dump it on his successor. What will the successor do? Well, that depends what happened in British politics. Will it be another Conservative Prime Minister? Will they be a more reasoned and rational person with a strong desire to try and fix this problem? Who knows? Or it may even be there may be an election and a potential Labour government or coalition headed by Labour will then have to deal with this poisoned chalice. So that possibly is what's next. Is that the Conservatives know they cannot fix this problem, not without creating a whole host of other problems. And so this is yet another one of the many things, or many problems that they're going to be pushing down the long grass as much as possible in order to, in order to make it to their successors are the ones to have to deal with the consequences of their failures. As for the consequences of Northern Ireland, well, I hope that that will mean that more rational people will prevail and that a compromise solution can be reached. So in that context, maybe delaying is a good thing, as quite frankly, like in the current crop of politicians in the British government to deal with it is well past their capabilities, and you wouldn't want them trying to deal with the tinderbox problem that is Northern Ireland. So oddly, I might find myself in a position of thinking that the delaying tactic is actually a good one. It actually pushes the problem and hopefully more competent people will come along and fix it. And if that is possible, then the protocol can be made to work, compromise can be reached, and Northern Ireland can continue without descending into violence and chaos. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope that was a sensible and logical way of explaining what is going on in the Northern Ireland Protocol. But no doubt we will be back here again to talk about it when we see whatever the next development is.